We're on Slack, we're on Zoom, we're connecting to employees around the world. Even frontline workers are taking opportunities that are outside of their day-to-day experience. And so the fundamental truth is that the way work is done is different. The way we as individuals think about ourselves, right?
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumitech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with CTech. Welcome to another episode of 20-Minute Leaders. Today, I'm with Ruslan Tovbulatov, Vice President of Global Marketing at Gloat, the world's first AI-powered talent marketplace platform. In his role, Ruslan oversees a global team of marketers across brand, demand, product marketing, and content, bringing the Gloat story to the world's largest enterprises. Prior to Gloat, Ruslan has a storied career across product, partnerships, research, and marketing at companies including Thrive Global, Google, YouTube, and Kantar Retail. He is a 30 under 30 recognized creative, a native Russian speaker, and a proud Dartmouth grad, currently based in New York City. Ruslan Tovbulatov, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very, very much for being here with me, Vice President of Global Marketing at Gloat. So really, really important position and a really important company today. The world is changing. Talent is changing. Things are moving quicker. People are looking for new opportunities. And it's a fascinating time to be alive and to be an employee and to have a talent of some sort. And we have Gloat that is helping enterprises move like startups. I love that statement from your website. And I can only imagine the fascinating position you're in as Vice President of Global Marketing in this company. So welcome, Ruslan.
Thank you so much. It's a true pleasure being here.
Thank you. Before we get started to talk about Gloat and talk about, this global marketplace for talent, tell me a little bit about your own journey. And, you've held some quite fascinating positions, within Google, YouTube, within Thrive and some other organizations as well. How do you see your own career as you go through your journey?
I've been really blessed by a fascinating career journey. So I was born in Moscow, Russia, and moved to the United States at a very young age. And started my career actually in the States at a company called Kantar Retail. And Kantar, for those that don't know, does large-scale consumer research. It really helps some of the largest, at that time, some of the largest CPG companies and some of the largest manufacturers make decisions around what products to create, how to price, package, et cetera. And all of that was rooted in large-scale consumer understanding, right? We do ethnographies, shop-alongs, in large-scale surveys. And that really set me up for the rest of my career in many ways because it taught me the power of consumer insights. It taught me the power of human decision-making. And so I had an interesting story going into Google where I got recruited, had a funny story, which we may get into, where I thought the recruiter was actually not even real because they signed it with the funny Google letters, ignored the recruiter, but found my way going into Google and having an amazing journey there for almost about 7 years, even 8. Where I worked on the core Google business and mobile, which we might get into. I really picked up the ins and outs of marketing there and the future of digital and storytelling because we went from traditional search to display and mobile to programmatic advertising and then to YouTube, and where I spent the better part of my career. We launched an amazing special team there called the Brand Lab, where we worked with 250 of the largest brands over the course of 5 years, helping them move to digital in their brand and storytelling.
Incredible.
And then found myself lucky enough to get recruited into a tiny company called Thrive Global at a time when not everyone was talking about mental health and well-being. But I saw something in what the CEO, Arianna Huffington, was trying to do with the business. And she had just written a book called Thrive that really spoke to me. And it was all about this question around, we were all obsessed with technology, but what about the human side of things? What about humanity? And we built a business out of it. We turned it into a SaaS business, grew it, from the ground up. I was an employee like 15 there, 16, and spent 4 great years there, and then found myself at Gloat. Now Gloat is transforming, as we'll get into, the conversation around how we match talent to opportunities, how we think about careers, how we think about data-driven decision-making around talent within organizations. How do we make organizations more agile? And so I've had an interesting journey that kind of built one on top of the other, but I'm very happy to be sharing some of that with you today.
So, Ruslan, I already am apologizing because I'm gonna go fast because there's way too much information I want to pack in these very short 20 minutes that we have in this episode. So, okay, first of all, the brain lab, the brand lab, not, well, it's also a brain lab, but the brand lab, you're looking at 250 brands across the world. You're leading it on a global level, within Google and YouTube. What is that like? What do you learn about creating a sustainable brand in the digital world, digitalizing brands for consumers?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We could talk for hours just about that topic. I think that was one of the most fundamental experiences for me because you got to understand the decision making that organizations have been doing for, decades around brand building, and how do you actually adapt that to new channels and new mediums. And it was actually very interesting because when we launched Brand Lab, it was 2012. Very hard to imagine, but at that time, YouTube was just a place for dogs and cats on skateboards. It was not a place to build brands, right? It was funny videos of babies and pets. And there was no Facebook video, there was no Instagram video, let alone TikTok. And so it was crazy to imagine, like
it's hard to imagine a world.
It's absolutely insane how quickly things change. So our conversations were actually, if you had a video recording, you would be almost appalled because it's like, how could you not see the power of digital video? How could you not see the power of going beyond a 15 or 30-second spot and beyond just measuring success in terms of gross rating points on television? At that time, people didn't even believe that we were going to move to digital, right? Netflix was not a thing yet. It's still in the way that it is today. So it was a lot of the lessons learned there was how do you actually shift people's mindsets and expose them to actually new thinking, new opportunities, and inspire them to try new things, even though they've been doing something the same way for 20, 30 years.
Right. I think that, I can only imagine the excitement of working with these brands and iterating on this process of creativity and figuring out how does consumer behavior change around the world and how are we positioned to help these brands, as such a big enterprise. Now, your entrance to Thrive, working with Huffington, you mentioned 15th employee?
Yes, I was 15th or 16th, yes.
Unbelievable, a company that I think has over 1,000 employees by now, and with such an important mission, and then becoming chief marketing officer. What are just a few key moments or lessons that you've learned as you grow your own marketing understanding and capacity now at a startup, not at a big enterprise that you were before?
Yeah, it was. I actually get calls from Googlers like that all the time to this day. How do you make that shift? Because, even to this day, the company is doing incredibly well, but people want to take risks and chances. And it really is a different journey. And I think one of the number one lessons, if anyone's listening that isn't going from a larger company or deciding between the two, is the grind is very real in a startup environment when you're a small company. And in that sense that there isn't someone kind of that you can, I always joked at Google, you could file a ticket for something and it would just get taken care of. But Ariana literally joked with us when we started the company. I remember coming into the first office, she's like, listen, if the trash doesn't get taken out, I take out the trash. And she picked up, the trash can and she started walking towards the door. And that mentality actually really carries, I think, a lot of successful entrepreneurs. I think it carries a lot of successful people that join startups where you can't just sit back and expect someone else to do something or someone else to take care of it. One of our culture values at Gloat here today is get it done. It's actually our number one value. And it's this idea, you don't sit back and wait for it to get done. You just get it done. And that mentality, I think, is very important. It's one of the biggest things. I can tell, probably 100 stories that I learned along the way, but I think that one has to underpin everything that you do. And then the other thing on the mental health and well-being space is just, I think it's so important to realize that a lot of times when you're working at a startup, you're kind of creating the market, and not everyone is going to see it at first. It took us a while when we were starting that, and why it was such an honor to be CMO of that business is we were trying to convince the world that mental health and well-being mattered. You would walk into a room and people would almost want to laugh you out, being like, this is soft things. These are soft crap. But you have to really believe in what you're doing. And that's why having the right people around you, having the right leadership team is very important, because there are very hard days where you question, like, is this ever going to get adopted? Are people ever going to realize this? Or are we crazy? But if you really have to believe in what you're doing, and that was true at Thrive for us on mental health and well-being. And now, you can't walk into a business conversation without talking about employee well-being or mental health. and the world has fundamentally changed. And we find the same thing at Gloat now, right? Where we're pushing the boundaries on how we think about talent, on how we think about skills, on how we think about opportunities, on how we think about hierarchies within organizations. And there are a lot of people that are afraid of that change, almost like what I said about Brand Lab. People have been doing the same thing for 20, 30 years. Why disrupt? And so being able to get things done and also really stay committed and believe in that what you're doing is right and meaningful, and there's a reason you get up every day, and surrounding yourself with the right people that push you along. I think those were two of the best, kind of the biggest realizations I had moving from a large enterprise to a smaller team.
Incredible. So connecting the dots between your work with Huffington at Thrive and being the chief marketing officer there, changing consumer behavior, probably the most exciting thing anybody can ask to do at a C-level position in a company, growing the way that the company Thrive grew, and now doing it at Gloat. Also shifting consumer behavior. The world is changing, perhaps very similar to how the world shifted also organically to understanding that mental health is such an important concept. You still have that responsibility on your shoulders as chief marketing officer. Now we're looking at talent, and we're looking at the global talent marketplace, and we're looking at helping enterprises move with agility and realizing that hiring is not just about the contract. It's actually about aligning the talent to the needs. And share with me a little bit about Gloat first as a company, and then how your work at Gloat is complementary to sort of the journey that you've been on until now.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning, because some of your listeners will probably be in Israel. There's a side of Gloat that a lot of locally that is the external side, where we actually match external talent to opportunities at any company. But where we really hit the aha moment, where we clicked into hypergrowth, is something we built called the talent marketplace. And the idea is simple, but it's incredibly disruptive. And this is what we're actually bringing to companies around the world, in EMEA, America, and all around the globe. And it's this idea that, imagine instead of your employees thinking their next best opportunity is outside of the company, looking internally.
It's actually inside.
And
yes.
It's such a simple idea, but it's a fundamental shift in the way we think about talent and matching people to opportunities and careers and everything. And the reason it's so disruptive is because of the way we execute it, right? For so long, kind of what I was saying about the 20, 30 years of talent management, maybe even longer. Actually, it's 100 years. We've traced it back to the original org chart. If you look back to the original org chart of IBM 100 years ago, it is literally, an executive at the top, and then directors, and then people in boxes kind of trickling down. And the reality is that that's not how work is done anymore. We're not just looking at an org chart and saying, oh, this is my place in there, let me do a command and control style way of managing the business, managing work. We're on Slack, we're on Zoom, we're connecting to employees around the world. Even frontline workers are taking opportunities that are outside of their day-to-day experience. And so the fundamental truth is that the way work is done is different. The way we as individuals think about ourselves, right? You think about the macro trends. We don't believe we're just one title or one job or one thing. We have side gigs, side hustles. We have hobbies, and we care about that. We try to bring that into work.
Podcasts.
And the reality is we didn't have a mechanism for talent management that way. So the talent marketplace actually breaks down skills of people and their passions on one side, and then breaks down work on the other, and dynamically connects the two. It decentralizes the decision-making. This isn't about HR saying, okay, let's go through the formal review process and decide that this is the headcount that you will get allocated for the next year or 2 years. You want to post a project, you're launching a new ice cream brand somewhere, you can pull together a team. You're going on maternity leave, you can break out your role into 5, 6 roles and have people backfill. Both true stories. One from Unilever, launched an ice cream brand in 6 weeks instead of months and months. All from assembling a team around the globe. Another one from Schneider Electric, where someone was going on maternity leave, backfilled her role, and then what happened? She came back to her role, avoiding the drama of figuring out where does the person go in the organization, and then ended up promoting 1 or 2 people that worked on her in her position because she saw that they were actually capable of stepping up. So I have hundreds of these types of stories. We're working with some of the largest brands in the world. And we have, an incredible set of stories just like that companies are really starting to think is there a new way to manage talent and work in the organization? It's all powered by this idea of a talent marketplace.
Beautiful. Now, obviously, I can see you sitting now with the CEOs and the C-level execs of these large companies and making that case, and everybody completely understands your point of view. But let's talk about the mid-level managers, the team leaders, even the VPs. You have to really educate an organization into even having people think that maybe before we actually go externally to look at different opportunities, let's look internally, right? This is, both top down and bottom up. So how do you get your message to the remaining portion of the organization that may not be at the same strategic level of thinking that the C-level execs are spending days in and days out?
I think that's where our job becomes really exciting. I like a good marketing challenge. And I think the beauty of us working with some of these large enterprises, you said something very astute. You used the word, I think, kind of changing consumer mindset. And I actually think that way all the time about the way I think about enterprise marketing and enterprise storytelling, because it's never just about the business. It's equally about the end users of that business and employees. And so when we tell that story, you're absolutely right? Selling in enterprise software or a technology is step one. Sometimes it's actually the easier step. And the how do you get people to adopt it? How do you get people to actually change their behaviors? And managers in this case are a huge component of that, because we have been taught for so long to really hold our head count as a sacred number. Oh, I got this head count. I'm not letting that go. But the magic that happens, and this is, my job then as a marketer, is to find these stories and then bring them to the people within these organizations and the market. That idea is called talent hoarding. And the reality is, it's a fear that never gets realized. Time and time again, every customer that rolls out a talent marketplace, what they find and their managers find is that when you open up your talent, you actually get access to even more talent. Because if you're working on interesting things, if you're a good manager, if you're actually, working on something that is worthy of attention, you can get all of a sudden access to a talent pool that you never had before. So all of a sudden, managers are realizing, wait, I gave up a few hours of my teammates' time or my coworkers' time to something, but now I actually have access to talent I never had before. And I'll give you one quick example. We were, even at Gloat, I just launched a new video for a product launch we were doing. And I had this idea of saying, okay, well, let me think about, if I'm doing this, I'll either work with a creative agency to do this work and they'll get someone to do the voiceover, or we'll hire a voiceover artist. And I had this realization, we call it We Gloat internally. I said, what if I post that project? What if I ask for a voiceover artist internally? I kid you not, within about an hour or two, someone from our customer success team says, hey, by the way, I'm a professional voiceover artist for brands you might recognize, like the Home Depot in the US and Jack Daniel's whiskey. Sends me the most beautiful, pristine recording, says professional studio at home. We had a custom recording done from within the company. So now what does that manager of that employee see? They have an engaged employee who's now taking on a marketing project, having fun, hopefully. Seems like he had fun, but he's now actually representing the brand in an even bigger way. He's part of something special that's beyond just the day-to-day. And so that manager now sees someone that's actually a bigger part of the tapestry of the company. So again, I could share hours of stories like that, both from within Gloat and, of course, the many companies that we're working with, like Unilever and Nestle and Schneider Electric and Seagate and MasterCard, and you name them. But it's an important shift in the way we think about talent and work. And so my job as a marketing leader is really letting the customers and the employees, frankly, tell that story for us.
I think one of the most interesting things that, one day will probably be studied in business schools as well, is the sort of the ripple effect and what this does. Not, I think, and you started touching this a little bit. You're talking about creating an engaged employee, and I think that one of the consumer shifts, it's not just understanding that employees have multiple talents for multiple parts of the organization, but it's also the fact that if you empower employees to work on another part of the organization, you're not missing out on their work within your team. You're empowering them to engage more with your brand, and they're going to be more committed to your team because they want to stay longer and they want to leverage their talent in various ways. And I think that is going to be an interesting idea to see whether it's something that's quantifiable or just something that we are able to measure, and to see how we can actually find the right balance between all those pieces. And I think that what you're doing with Gloat is fascinating. Obviously, the journey that you've had with Thrive and with Google and YouTube and your company, I think it's really fascinating, and I really want to thank you for these 20 minutes. But I want to get to know Ruslan just a little bit better. Take me back before starting your company, before doing marketing. 10 years old, elementary school, middle school, somewhere around that time. What are you fascinated by? What really sparks your curiosity?
Yeah, I love that question. So, and as you were asking, I think I went to two different places. I think one, I was such a child of the transition between Moscow and America, and so I became so hungry to understand cultural differences, and I think I've always been really driven by that. And cultural differences to me, they meant so many different things. It was from the things that were on TV. Like I remember growing up and in a way feeling like I was getting all of my morals from a show called The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which of course a lot of people know with Will Smith and Family Matters, and just being kind of this culture transformation of understanding different nuances, what drives people, cultural backgrounds, the different experiences that people have. That was always fascinating to me. And then I think where the next experience that I think was really fundamental to me was I was always fascinated by consumer mindset. I think there was a story that I've told in interviews before, and I still think about all the time. I remember walking into the checkout aisle or walking to a grocery store, getting to the checkout aisle and seeing a new brand of gum in the shelf. And it was, I think, the Stride gum that it was. So it was a little later. I think it was probably in middle school or high school. And I remember looking at the back of this, and it was a new package. It had like a little portfolio. It looked like a little briefcase almost. You like slot it in as had this cool little tin foil on the cover. And I was very interested by it and said, and then I turned it and it said Wrigley's on it. I was like, wait a minute, Wrigley's makes Juicy Fruit and all these other brands. And then I started turning them around and realizing Wrigley's makes a lot of these gum brands. And I started realizing like, wait, there's this decision-making process that this gum is worth this much on the shelf and uses this color and is in this format versus Stride versus Five versus you name the different types of gums on the market. And it blew my mind, this idea that you have to really think about positioning, pricing, packaging, aligning that to consumer expectations and needs. And I think that actually got me on this journey to where I am today with, leading marketing teams and trying to connect the business opportunities and the right products to the right people and the consumer mindset.
Fascinating. That's all I can say. It's just fascinating. Ruslan, thank you so much for these 20 minutes. Thank you for the amazing work that you've been doing, both in Google, YouTube, mental health with Thrive, now with Gloat, and transforming, really the lives of employees and organizations, a ripple effect that will impact both on a business level, but also on a cultural level and a personal level. So thank you for your time and your energy, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you, Michael. You're inspiring many of us. I love the conversations you've had. I've listened to many of them. I think you're putting a lot of great wisdom into the market, and I take great inspiration from it. So thank you for hosting this and bringing wisdom to the world.